Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Teacher Transition Expert Series. Today, we are joined by none other than Andrew Webb. Andrew Webb and myself met through the power of LinkedIn and networking. Andrew has put out a variety of resources looking to support those who are trying to make a career switch or a transition through his website, The Employed Historian. So be sure to check that out in the episode details below. Andrew is a former content marketer, SEO specialist turned content designer. And we talk about all the things that it takes to actually make a transition a reality, the importance of personal branding, and what it actually means to be a content designer. Andrew has spent a lot of time pivoting throughout his career, and we talk about exactly what that means, what that looks like, and any hardships or things that we've learned along the way. So we hope you tune in, turn it up, and let's get ready to do this. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Leena Marie Saleh, the Edtech Guru. I want to thank you so much for spending time with me on this journey, for all the support that you give me, and for following along. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, and let's get ready to do this. All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Teacher Transition Expert Series. Today, we have the pleasure of being joined by Andrew Webb, who is a content designer. Andrew, how are you doing today?
Hi, Leena. Thanks for having me on today. I'm thrilled.
Great. And we are as well. And I can't wait to dig into today's episode. So do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, well, I studied history to start, thinking I wanted to be a professor, shaping young minds and exploring the past. Turns out, not really a viable career path if you like money. So transitioned into content marketing. Digital marketing really is kind of the umbrella discipline. Learned the dark art of search engine optimization, and more recently transitioned into user experience, where I have a similar sounding but very different job title, which is content designer. So that's over the course of about 7 years, and there's been a lot of transitions through those 7 years. But I think it just goes to show that even with a background that's related to teaching or that frequently funnels into teaching, there are a lot of options out there.
And I think that that's a good segue into our episode today, just talking about how everyone has different transitions throughout their lives, or what we call pivoting or career pivoting. But I think that that's just important to kind of note that. So before we dig into exactly what a content designer is, what you did for like SEO and content marketing and all of that stuff, let's talk a little bit about your employed historian and a little bit of the backstory to that.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. So I started a brand called The Employed Historian because, as a very recent grad, once upon a time, I really struggled to get a job in a tech town. And some people even thought like, oh, were you going to just be an unemployed historian? So I actually took a bit of liberty with the title from the wealthy barber. And I thought, well, unemployed historian, I'll make it The Employed Historian, just to, as a sort of tongue-in-cheek, dry, sarcastic drip kind of a title. And really, I wanted to show people that there's so much more you can bring to the table. It doesn't just have to be programming or no skills at all. There's a bit more to the world than that. And unfortunately, I didn't really have the confidence to do that sooner in my career because I just didn't feel that I had those skills. So after a really bad unemployment stint in my very early career, I worked my butt off really over the next 5 years. And then, looking back, I thought, well, maybe I really should teach people, the kind of things that I've discovered. Not that I'm the expert, but that there are options out there. How do you articulate your skills? How do you start a new project without being given the job opportunity first? I think a lot of humanities and liberal arts majors have these anxieties and they face these obstacles. Frankly, there isn't really a unified or standardized or agreed upon way to solve these problems, and it affects a lot of people. So that's really what Employed Historian is about. It is a website, tons of blog content, lots of how-to stuff, but also I'm about to start a podcast, I hope. First 5 episodes have been recorded, just need to launch it.
That's a big feat, though. 5 episodes is pretty big.
I guess so, yeah. Yeah, so I mean, really, at the end of the day, it's just to show people, what is a possible roadmap you might need to go from unemployed graduate to a really hard-hitting candidate. So anyway, I just love interviewing everyone under the sun, who might have some sort of interesting career path. For example, my childhood next door neighbor, he got a political science degree, recently has ended up as an investment executive with BlackRock, which is one of the biggest investment firms in North America and the most well-respected. What does that journey look like? I would love to know. I'm sure lots of others would too, right? So uncovering stories like that, really. And that's the employed historian in a not so small nutshell.
And so those of you that are listening, I would underplaying it a bit, but I definitely would say go there, check it out. There are a ton of resources. Sometimes we just don't know where to get started or how to do things. And so by sharing in someone else's journey, that they've faced some hardships and things like that. And so it's really great to be able to go there and see the different resources. And even I went to the site for the first time after we spoke the first time. I was like, wow, oh my gosh, there's so much goodness here that I can start sharing. So I've been sharing that with actually teacher transitioners that I meet with. So definitely recommend you exploring that. So to kind of switch gears a little bit, and you talked about telling people stories and the hidden gems of how they got to where they are. So you are currently a content designer, but you had said that you were digital marketing or content marketing and SEO, search engine optimization. Maybe you could share a little bit about that story and how you kind of got there from where you started.
Yeah, for sure. So I did a master's degree in history, again, under the delusion that I would be a professor, and then somewhat quickly realized that wasn't the path. I then started looking for opportunities, and a friend of mine from my program said, hey, there's this guy starting a new publishing company, kind of a hole in the wall operation, nothing too impressive. You could literally see through the floorboards into the next floor down. It was rough at times, but I worked for that company, wrote some textbooks, but like the owner had some directional issues on how we wanted to run the business. And he said, well, I've invested in digital marketing companies, so we're going to start doing that now also. Weird, but he pointed at me and said, you're good at writing, you're going to do this. So anyway, I decided I didn't really like the company much, but I learned all about digital marketing, left that company, was a freelancer for a while, and then also later joined a smaller but more experienced digital marketing agency. And I took on sort of an mid-entry level role. I was a content writer, but also the de facto editor for all of the other junior content writers. And, if you're not familiar with digital marketing and content writing, just to bring people up to speed, there's like this whole ecosystem of web pages that need to educate customers. So as a content writer, you have to go out, research, learn an industry, the ins and outs, synthesize a bunch of pages, i.e. secondary research from all these other web pages and other businesses, or wikis or whatever it might be, and create something that is informative, helpful, maybe even a little entertaining, and that builds trust with a business's users. So it's a lot of writing. It's like miniature commercialized essay writing. So coming from a history background, that was quite natural to me. And while I was there, I learned that you're not just writing for people, you're also writing for Google, also known as the big G to some. I mean, this is kind of getting to the technical stuff of their business model, but they scrape the internet for the most high quality pages, and then they rank them. And part of the deal when you write blog posts or web pages is that you need to write them, and this is oversimplifying it, but you try to write them in a way that gets Google's attention and favor. Now, that is a gross oversimplification, and anyone in the field will say, like, there's so much more to it. They're right. But Cliff Notes, that's what it was. So I had to learn the technical side of that, and I had to really start learning not only the anatomy of a web page, but really how engineers at Google thought, and like how robots interact with content intended for humans, and how to write for both. And that was interesting, and that took me down some technical paths where I learned a lot more about how to build a website, how to design them to a degree. I'm not a designer of visual arts, let's say, but yeah. So really, I mean, I got this really kind of cool online publisher skill set, after a few years. But then one of my employers in my next job tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, we have this digital insurance product and we think it's great, but people are really struggling, like how to get from one end to the other and actually, get through it. You're good at writing. Can you help us? This was my introduction to user experience, where I was no longer writing just long form content, but I was writing very short, snappy bits of copy. It wasn't even creative. It was very functional, and it had to be combined with elements of bits of software, like maybe a button, it could be a header, might be an image or a little help icon with, floater text, whatever it might be. And that was really to help people gain context and a clue. And after that, I applied to a larger, pretty well-known tech company, who I will keep nameless for this podcast. But they said, hey, we think you'd be great in a dedicated user experience role, not just like a marketing role. So they put me in one. And that's really how I really firmly got into user experience. But interestingly, there was no educational component to that transition. It was just doing the work.
Which I think is very underrated and undervalued for a lot of people who are transitioning. Often I get this question, should I go back to school? Should I get more schooling? Should I get this certification or that certification? And a lot of it is just, there isn't an easy answer for how to get to a lot of these roles. It's just, you have to put your head down and work and learn it. It's I call it a productive struggle. You really have to productively struggle to get where you're going. And there's not really an easy pathway. And anyone who's even, a large CEO of a company, it's not like somebody plucked them for the most part and was like, hey, you're going to be really good at the top. You're going to do this. They just had really good pathways and we're able to work and be flexible and be adaptable. And those are all skills that you kind of need. So what I love so much about your story is it wasn't like, hey, I went to school to be a UX person, or I went to school for SEO or content marketing. You actually went to school to be a historian, professor of history. I also have a history background, so I know a little bit about that. And then, kind of took a different pathway and took opportunities that came to you. Every opportunity isn't always the best one, but it has the best opportunity to get us to the next point. And I think if you're willing to learn and willing to dig your feet in, just get your hands dirty a little bit, you'd be surprised where it can take you, or, how you can get to that next position.
Oh, yeah, I agree so much with all of what you just said. And especially just about opportunities tend to proliferate the more that you embrace them. Like that part especially is just so true. Like I can trace every opportunity back to a previous opportunity, and you don't go from 0 to 10 or 0 to 100. You have to go 0 to 1, and there's a struggle in just learning how to get started and learning how to operate in the working world. And not unlike education, you learn a bit more and a bit more so that you're equipped to handle not just deeper but broader problem scenarios as well. And that's just, I never would have learned that in a classroom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think most of what we learn in life, we don't learn in the classroom, unfortunately, as much as we would love as teachers to be like, oh yeah, everybody is getting the best things that they're getting out of the classroom. But the thing about it is life is all about learning, and, it's just, we can't learn everything in school. So there's other opportunities that we have to take. I just want people to really take that away from every time I do these teacher transition expert series or talk to teacher transitioners. No one ever has the same journey that they took. But the unique thing about every single person is they basically took the opportunities that came to them, or, had this productive struggle to kind of get where they were going. So I think that's just an important component of any career transitioner, or any part of just even climbing a ladder, through the corporate landscape. Even if you want to get somewhere new, you have to take on new opportunities.
100%. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about, you and I both met via LinkedIn, just, chatting with each other that way. So let's talk a little bit about the importance of having a personal brand of some kind and what that means for today's job market, I guess you would say.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily an expert on personal branding, but I have come to realize almost by accident that it is so important. In a recent job search, I actually had a few people reach out to me because they knew me from previous interviews, even. There is this one big up and coming real estate company with a lot of funding. Sorry, real estate tech company, I should say. And they said, well, before we really go through all the trouble of putting a job posting out there and sifting through candidates, we thought maybe, we'd just see if you wanted the role. And it was actually a really cool role. Ultimately, not what I wanted at the moment, but I mean, as the economy is taking a turn in the news, it feels really nice to have that kind of safety net. So I mean, even defensively, personal brands are a huge boon. But more to the point, though, I mean, you can really use your personal brand to really convince people that you are the right fit for the job you want. Maybe not just the job that is safe or a second choice in your life context, but personal branding is a lot of things that really just culminate in you having credibility in a field or for a kind of work, a line of work, or maybe a type of project. As a content designer, for example, I could start a podcast on content design. I could contribute to content design communities. I could perhaps join Slack channels or Facebook or LinkedIn groups about that and build lateral connections with those members. Could also just build a following on LinkedIn, posting daily. Any or all of those things could really be the vehicle for your personal brand. But really, I mean, it comes down to building relationships and being known for something, I think. And, really fewer things have helped me out than having a personal brand where people say, oh, yeah, this guy clearly knows about this and this, or I remember his work from, a year ago, or he said something really insightful about this field like a month ago. And I think maybe I should go ask him about that. Case in point, I came to you with questions about EdTech because of your posts on LinkedIn, even though we'd never met in real life, right?
Yep.
And now here we are chatting. And I mean, again, and that kind of ties back into opportunities proliferating. Opportunities come to you through personal branding and then they grow from there. I love it.
Me too. And I completely just agree with that. I think oftentimes people think that they have to like produce like mass amounts of content or like do certain things. Like that brings me joy. So that's what I like to do. It may not bring everyone joy, and that's okay, but you do need to be seen in some capacity. And I think if you read any book on career transitioning or building your brand or just anything of what today's job market is that you have to be seen. Now, if you want an entry level role and you're kind of looking to transition, it's less important. However, if you're kind of looking for that middle to like upper level echelon of work, I guess you would say more of those mid to like senior level, you're going to need a little bit of that because nobody wants to take a risk, invest a lot of money in them, bring them in, and they don't know how to do the role. I'm not saying that they can't learn to do the role, but it takes a lot of time to teach somebody. If you're going for an entry level, it doesn't really matter too much. But it really does matter in the point of just building relationships, even where you work. You could even reach out to somebody and be like, hey, can I shadow you for a day and see kind of what you're doing? But you never know where those relationships are going to get you. Just case in point, my other podcast that I do, I met that person through the conference circuit. We were going to a lot of trade shows. We didn't know each other at all beforehand. We just met each other, had lots of people try to recruit me probably in the same way that you do, from meeting them or having conversations with them via LinkedIn. It just lends itself to different opportunities that you would have never had. When we were kids, I'm sure hopefully we're close in age, but if we're not, whatever. The only way that I got to know somebody was if they were in my school or if they were in my neighborhood or they went to the same, church or that sort of thing. That was the only way your network existed. Today, your network can be anybody in any part of the world. Anybody who has internet access, you can literally contact them and be like, hey, let's connect, or, that sort of a thing. So I think that that's also like an underutilized aspect of this process.
Yeah. And, I used to be a more conservative networker. I would follow the advice of, only connect with people on LinkedIn if you met them in real life. And there's an argument to be made for that, because then, okay, if they know you and you know them, then it's a stronger relationship and all that is fine. But it's probably no surprise that the pandemic and remote work accelerated this. Well, I'm no genius for bringing that up. To get out of our shells and to just to meet people, even on the other side of a screen. And I'm so glad I did that, because I've met tons of people. In fact, all of my coworkers over the last 3 years, I've worked with them remotely. Like many people I've either never met or haven't seen in person for about 3 years, maybe more. So, it doesn't have to be in person. It doesn't have to be a handshake. It doesn't have to be wearing a conference name badge thing. Like you can connect with people based on your interests, based on your skills, based on your community, and you absolutely should.
Yeah.
It's just you're leaving so much on the table if you don't.
Just yes. So I like all of those things. I do want to kind of ask you a question. So I get this question often. Okay, well, I don't know how to network, or I don't know how to like send a message request. Do you have any tips for anyone who is looking to make that cold outreach to somebody that they don't know, sending them a message connection or just trying to network with them?
Yeah, I have two pieces of advice that should probably be used conditionally, not carte blanche. But the first is to have a specific ask. If you just say, "Hey, can I just pick your brain sometime?" The other person receiving that is going to say, "Who are you? Why do I care? I'm busy." And also, again, "Who are you?" With more snark. The second thing is to make it spiffy, and not, or maybe not spiffy, but make it quick. Respect their time. And I actually, in any outreach template I've sent, well, most, I should say, I've tried to acknowledge people's time and to say, "Hey, I know you're busy. No worries if you don't have bandwidth for this, but I saw this thing you posted, or I encountered this and your name came up. I would really love to get your opinion on this because I know you're a trusted or some kind of authority on this topic." And in some cases, I mean, now, I'm a bit more advanced in my career, so I'm okay to say, "Hey, like, I don't mind compensating you for your time if it's like a 1 hour consult, if you do that sort of thing." But, just again, respecting their time and really making it short, sweet, specific, I find tends to get the best results. That's true for marketing outreach as well, not just career networking. So free tip there. But yeah, it really comes down to that. And you're just playing at some point, like, you put quality and effort into every word you communicate, but you have to realize that there is sort of a law of averages. So 70% of people may not respond. Okay, that's okay. You analyze, you improve, you iterate, you move on, keep doing it.
Since I started working at Canva, I have a massive amount of people coming to me and sending me their resumes and being like, "Hey, can you give me a job?" And I don't, one, I don't know them at all. Two, it's just like out of context, like, "Hey, here's my resume. Can you put a referral in for me?" I'll get back to that in a second. But, and then the other one is just, "Hey, can you give me some advice on this, this, and this?" And I'm like, "Oh, yes, absolutely. Thank you for being specific. Thank you for letting me know what you need." Because I also don't have the time to like do this back and forth guesswork. We're all very, very busy. Just say what you want. Just be upfront and be like, "Hey, this is what I really am looking for." And then that's more likely to elicit a response from somebody. And I've learned that the hard way. I've been like, "Hey, can I pick your brain?" And people don't respond. And then I try again. "Hey, can I pick your brain about this, this, and this? I'm really looking to learn this." And then that usually elicits a response. So being more specific about that. And then I want to come back to the piece about the referral, about people just sending things and being like out of context, like, "Hey, here's a referral." When companies or somebody in a position makes a referral, and I'm just making this note for everyone to be known, that usually means that the person has a connection with that person and that they probably trust them to come in, because it's sort of like a risk on them. Like, sometimes the person may be compensated for the referral. Okay, great. But that also means that they're expecting a lot of you from your referral. So I think that that's also something that maybe is misunderstood. Like, "Oh, they're just referring me." It's like, they're referring me, but that's also putting it on my shoulders. Like, if this person doesn't work out, they're going to be like, "Oh, well, this person probably isn't that great," if you stick your neck out for someone. So I think that's also something that I just want to throw in the mix as we're talking about this, connecting and building relationships.
Yeah, and I mean, that's really what the referral is all about, right? It's supposed to carry that weight. It's supposed to reflect some sort of prior relationship, some way you can vouch for the other person. So, I mean, I wouldn't cold call someone for a referral. That's just not gonna. It literally just flies in the face of what a referral is supposed to be. But advice, yeah, like the way you phrased it, very specific advice. Likewise, I try to give that out freely wherever and whenever I can, and it also helps you as the person receiving that request to scope it out. Like you say, you think to yourself, "Okay, cool. They wanted advice on two things. They're kind of related, so I'll just explain, like, kind of how I understand these things, the relationship between the two, and that'll take me, like, I don't know, like 2+ minutes to write. It'll be fine." As opposed to, like, "Can I just pick your brain?" And then, like, "Okay, can we meet? Like, okay, like, is this going to be like an hour meeting? Like, like, you might have kids or something, or like, I got to walk the dog right after. Like, I don't have time. Like, when is this going to happen? No, they're just going to put it down and walk away if it's a vague request. So,
So it sounds like we're on the same page. And I think everyone is. It's just good for you to kind of
mhm.
pocket in your brain as you're kind of networking, as you're going about your day and kind of asking for things. Just remember that everyone's time is important, just like yours. Like, if a student came up to you on your lunch, are you like, "Yes, I absolutely want to talk to you about this?" You're like, "No, this is my time. I want to spend it in this way." So I think just kind of be mindful and thinking about that. Now that we've kind of talked about networking and we've talked about, the different career pathways and journeys that we can take, What sorts of job hunting resources, which we briefly touched on this kind of at the beginning of the episode, do you have that would be applicable to anyone who's career switching or job hunting or, figuring out what they should do next?
Definitely. The first is, the classic resume, but obviously you're not going to apply without a resume. So what I will say here is try to quantify it, and try to quantify all the bullets in some way, give it a sense of scope, give it a sense of impact, the bottom line, or even just something that kind of speaks to the amount of effort or time that may have gone into it. So instead of saying, I wrote blogs, you should say, my best blog had an average time on page of 5 minutes and 40 seconds, which is a lot in the internet world. And that will show an informed hiring manager in that space, like, oh, like they wrote quality stuff. Or in my current role, I am one content designer in an organization of 500 people. So then, the hiring manager might understand, okay, so they've understood that they need to set up systems in place to service a much larger team structure. Things that really speak to kind of the scale, scope, and impact of your work. So that may not be new, but what has really helped me as much as a resume is having a portfolio website. And this is where I get a lot of scoffs sometimes, but like nothing, I don't think anything has helped me more, honestly. You get to visualize your work, you get to control your professional narrative, which is super helpful as we all go into a recession, just an FYI. You can show projects, you can show testimonials, even, maybe someone made a testimonial of your freelance business on Google. No one sees that on LinkedIn. Or they're looking at a website and might not see the LinkedIn testimonials. You can bring that all in one place and weave it together the way you want. So, and you can give yourself a blogging platform as well. So if you have thoughts on the industry, and you should, you can bring this all in one place. And I often hear, oh, well, you could just put that in a PDF. It's not the same. I mean, that's the next best thing, but it's not as good.
No. And your resume is only like a small blip, I think, of things. But I like what you said was making sure that it has impact, like how much impact you can show on your resume, but also you can do that in a portfolio. Sometimes I look at people's
Yes.
portfolio. I don't care how you make it. You can make it on Canva, you can make a one-page site, you can make a Google site. I don't care. But what I do want to see when I go and I look at someone's portfolio is, are you sharing the same things that everyone else is sharing? Or is there some sort of like pivoting point, like kind of making you stand out? But the portfolio is, it's literally your place to shine. And a recruiter can go to that, you put it in your LinkedIn headline or whatever, and a recruiter can go to it and be like, oh, there's way more quantifiable things than are just listed in these bullet points on a resume or that sort of a thing. It's just another way to market yourself to stand out from other people. And I know I personally want to look for people's portfolios, even if it's a teaching portfolio and you're like, oh, I did this lesson plan, and you show me like a video and show me that you use social media and you know how to video edit. Like there's all kinds of hidden things that are coming out of your portfolio that are not going to jump off the page of a resume, because the resume is just so flat, it's so boring. It's like, it just doesn't have much like
Yeah.
zhuzh to it. It's
It's
just,
more of a screening tool at this point,
yeah,
honestly. Yeah.
exactly.
But the
Yeah.
portfolios, yeah. And what I should also say is that as I transitioned from marketing into user experience, having a portfolio really let me show rather than tell. It's one thing to say, like, I made a style guide. Well, that's great. Like, was it in Google Docs? Was it just black and white? Was everything like the same font? No. Like, you want to be able to show even just a screenshot of that, maybe, or something, or whatever kind of approximate equivalent you're allowed to show from your work. And in this way, I was able to show things that don't really show up in a resume, like this is how I created a user journey, charting how people flow through, marketing to website to product to retention. I was able to show sample bits of software I had helped make, not as a coder, but as a content designer, adding context and clarity and language and layout, things that, again, would not show up on a resume or a LinkedIn profile, and you just, as you're transitioning, you really need to show the work, not tell it. I found anyway. So, and that's why I just, everyone who ever asks me for advice, I just say portfolio site over and over again. Some people listen, which is good.
I think what we've kind of uncovered even today is just the same thing with like building your brand or anything like that, is to show. And when you can show, so like even if you're commenting on, I don't know, a Reddit thread, which by the way, be really careful because that's very Googleable, for people to find things. So just be very cautious when you're looking in the, in the dark web of life, but it's visible. So you're being able to show something. So if you're writing, even if you're writing like a product description on Amazon, like that's a good place to like practice talking about something in like detail or, anything like that. That's low risk. So that's, not hiring managers, not looking at your Amazon reviews more likely than not, unless you're doing something that's related to that. But there's just different ways to show rather than tell. And I love exactly what you're saying as a portfolio. And I often tell people, and a lot of like career coaches and things say not to, but I just feel like it brings you a ton of value, like understated value.
Yeah, and honestly, it helps with freelance jobs too. I recently had a job search in between two jobs, and my portfolio said, I mean, I spent like probably a week updating it and redesigning it. And some people thought I was a little bit silly for that. But then, in addition to helping me land six-figure roles, I also got some freelance contracts. One of them was to the tune of about $7,000, which is like, it's pretty significant. And I got to do all this cool stuff for them and kind of stretch my creative muscles a little bit for them. Like it was money building, it was experience building, it was reputation building, and I got two great new contacts out of it. Like we still keep in touch. I mean, if it weren't for the whole money professional relationship, we'd probably be like friends at a pub somewhere, right? And I cannot wait to work with them again. And they told me that it was just your portfolio. Like, yeah, we've seen your LinkedIn profile, but when I saw your portfolio, the new one that you just made, I knew that you were the person we were going to hire. That's what they told me. So I would, yeah, if I had to choose just one, I think at this point, I might actually go with the portfolio. If you were stuck on a
Hmm.
desert island and blah, 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 could only choose one thing, but
I think that's an interesting perspective because really that's really the same note as like that relationship sort of building in a sense. Like I don't
Mhm.
I don't know. Everything is just being visual, and I think that's like an important takeaway. So to close out our interview today, what obviously you just said your portfolio is probably your desert island thing, but are there any tips or tricks that you would give for someone who is looking for that like career change? It could be starting out, it could be like in the middle of the process, or even just looking to, I would even say this is applicable to even like upskilling in your company, like maybe trying to like, I don't know, get a new role or something like that. But what types of tips and tricks would you suggest?
I would actually suggest just pick something where you want to grow, get started. That's the tweet. And this is how I got into a great new field with pretty recognizable brand names for my career without ever expecting that I'd be able to get there at first. There was no degree, diploma, 12-part seminar, nothing. You say, okay, I need to learn this, or I want to learn this, and then you go and you try to make your own project out of it. Maybe as a freelance project if you can, get paid, get a recommendation. Maybe as a volunteer project, right? Maybe someone needs a style guide. Maybe they need a new logo. Maybe they need online content. Maybe they need a website sketch. Maybe you just do the wireframes. Maybe you don't have to do the whole thing, right? Could be anything. Localize it, make it manageable, do it, and then show your work. And that's really, especially when you're transitioning into a new field, because they might say, well, this person's been in the working world for 7 years, but I don't know if they've done this whole UX thing long enough. Boom, here's what I did. And if you can get testimonials based on that, that starts to snowball the impact to into a, well, I don't know if there's a term for boulder and snowball in one, but a lot of impact anyway. And maybe once you do that, start connecting with recruiters, third party recruiters. They work for the employer, but they're always on the lookout for new candidates. They have inside connections with the jobs you probably want, and what I'm seeing is that it's kind of customary to hire people at large corporations as contract workers to start and then maybe phase them into full time. So you're probably going to have to start out there anyway if you're not working for a small company. So with all that in mind, help yourself, help recruiters help you get a good job. And
Yep.
that's high level the formula.
That's exactly it. Oh, the takeaway I have is get started. That's really more than
Yeah.
anything. What what you should do. And I had another teacher transitioner who said the same sort of thing, teacher transition expert who said the same thing, like take a project and kind of turn it into something. At the very least, you're showing that you can do something. So just put it out there. It doesn't really hurt. There's nothing's hurting you while you're doing it. It may take a little bit of time, which
Right.
obviously we know time is money, but it's better to be able to showcase that in a way, especially if you're really looking to transition to one of those bigger companies, because you're right.
Mhm.
They do a lot of contract work first. And even smaller companies do that too. They bring on contractors
Yeah.
first because it's much lower risk for them. And then if they like you and it feels like it's a good fit, then they'll bring you on full time. And that's usually what you'll see a lot of times actually in job postings. And I think more companies are
Mhm.
actually pivoting to like more of that type of a model. Not all of them, but you are seeing it more commonly and more
Yeah.
frequently than we've ever seen it before. And it's just the low risk part for the company. If they don't like you, then they're like, bye, you're not really working for us. But more times than not, that's
Mhm.
the chance that you get to prove yourself to get that long-term hireable role. So
Yeah. And just to give a little bit of quick perspective on that, I'll keep this part short, I promise. It's not just tech companies that do that, but I got a lot of attention from banks, like national banks, who also do that. And everybody I interviewed said, "Oh yeah, I started off as a contractor. Bob started off as a contractor. Jane started off as a contractor. We all started off as contractors." And this is in like the most like cutting edge, like fintech design pod, like people making like good money in a cutting edge field, like even their contract work. So it's not necessarily something you need to be afraid of. I mean, maybe if your peers are and you aren't, maybe that's a competitive advantage, but don't be afraid of it. Lean into it, embrace it, make it your stepping stone. And that's all.
yes, make it your stepping stone. That's what we're going to leave you with today. So thank you guys so much for joining us for today's episode. Andrew, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your tips, tricks, and your story.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
No problem. And we'll see you guys all next time. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much. You've made it this far. We are so thankful that you're here. Make sure to hit the subscribe button, thumbs up, comment below, and join us for all of our next videos. Thank you so much for joining us as we disrupt education together. See you guys soon. Bye, everybody.